The detention facility, Sigma-7, floated in the void between star systems, a neutral ground where the Galactic Council processed prisoners from countless worlds. Madison Torres stood at her post, arms crossed, watching the latest batch of detainees shuffle into the processing bay. Her partner, Terry Chen, checked his tablet with practiced efficiency. "Standard protocol," droned the Valorian administrator, its translucent tentacles twitching with bureaucratic certainty. "All prisoners must be stripped of clothing and possessions for scanning. Security Procedure 4471B. Madison's jaw tightened. She'd read that procedure. Every species in the facility, from the crystalline Thaxians to the methane-breathing Krell, followed it without question. Prisoners stood naked and vulnerable while machines catalogued every molecule of their bodies, searching for contraband, weapons, or biological threats. But today's prisoners were different. Today's prisoners were human. 12 scared faces stared back at her. Merchants and colonists picked up during a border skirmish that nobody wanted, but everyone blamed on someone else. They'd been in the wrong sector at the wrong time. Now they were here, waiting to be processed like every other species before them. "No," Madison said quietly. The administrator's eye stalk swiveled toward her. "Excuse me, Guard Torres." I said no. Madison stepped forward, positioning herself between the Valorian and the human prisoners. "We're not stripping." Terry looked up from his tablet, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes met Madison's with understanding. They'd talked about this possibility during the long shifts. What would they do if humans ever ended up on the wrong side of the detention bay doors? "This is protocol." The Valorian's voice rose, its translator struggling with the concept of disobedience. "Every species complies. There are no exceptions." "Then we're the first exception," Madison replied, her voice steady. "Or you can consider this humanity's formal objection to your protocol." The bay fell silent. Other guards, Corellian, Zenthi, even a massive Thuran, paused in their duties to watch. Prisoners from a dozen worlds pressed against their holding cells, curious about the commotion. "Why?" the administrator demanded. "What makes humans different? You have the same biological requirements for security screening as every other carbon-based species." Madison considered her answer carefully. How could she explain 10,000 years of human culture, dignity, and autonomy to beings who'd never questioned this process? How could she make them understand that for humans, forced nakedness wasn't just uncomfortable, it was a violation that echoed through their darkest histories? "Because we said no," Terry spoke up, moving to stand beside Madison. "Because consent matters to us. Because dignity isn't something you take from someone just because you can." The Valorian's tentacles writhed in agitation. "This is illogical. We have scanned millions of prisoners. The procedure is painless, efficient, and necessary for station security." "Then scan them clothed," Madison suggested. "Your technology can detect a weapon inside a cargo container from 3 sectors away. You're telling me you can't scan through fabric?" The administrator's silence spoke volumes. "You can," Terry said, realization dawning on his face. "You've always been able to." "This isn't about security at all, is it?" Around the bay, other guards began to murmur. The Corellian stepped closer, her ridge-crested head tilting in consideration. She'd been a guard here for 40 cycles, processed thousands of prisoners. She'd never questioned the protocol. "It's about power," Madison continued, her voice carrying across the bay. "It's about making prisoners feel powerless from the moment they arrive. Break them down, strip away their identity, their culture, their sense of self. Make them easier to control. That's standard xenopsychological practice," the Valorian protested, but its voice had lost its certainty. "Established by the Council's own behavioral scientists. Established without humans," Terry pointed out. "We weren't part of your council when these rules were written. And maybe, just maybe, we have something to teach you about dignity and respect." One of the human prisoners, a young woman with determined eyes, spoke up. "We'll cooperate with your scans. We'll answer your questions. We'll follow your lawful detention procedures. But we won't be stripped of our humanity just because it's convenient for your processing system." The Corellian guard made a clicking sound, her species equivalent of laughter. "She speaks well. Perhaps the humans have a point, Administrator." The Valorian looked around the bay, seeing its carefully maintained order beginning to crack. Other prisoners were watching with new eyes, some straightening their shoulders, others whispering to cellmates in a dozen languages. "If I make an exception for humans," the Administrator said slowly, "others will demand the same treatment." "Good," Madison replied. "They should. Every species should have the right to say no to unnecessary violations of their dignity. That's not chaos, that's justice." For a long moment, the Administrator was silent, its tentacles still. Then, with what might have been a sigh in its own language, it gestured to a technician. Activate the clothes scanning protocol, it ordered. Log it as a pilot program. For humans initially, we will evaluate expansion to other species pending council review. Madison allowed herself a small smile. Thank you, Administrator. As the technicians adjusted their equipment, Madison watched the human prisoners relax, their fear giving way to relief and something else. Pride that even here, millions of light years from Earth, their species had stood up for something fundamental. Terry leaned closer to Madison. You know this is going to cause problems up the chain, right? Reports, hearings, diplomatic incidents. Yay, Madison agreed, watching as the first human prisoner walked through the new scanning procedure, fully clothed and dignified. But some problems are worth causing. Across the bay, other prisoners were talking now, asking their own guards questions in hesitant voices. Could they refuse? Did they have rights they'd never known about? The Corellian guard caught Madison's eye and offered a respectful nod, warrior to warrior, recognizing courage when she saw it. Sometimes the most human thing you could do was simply say no, and sometimes that was enough to change everything.